Hello. Hey. How's everybody doing? Chris and Christy's glad to have you back. Well, how many of you guys have seen the movie Inception? Nobody? Anybody? I'll talk a little bit about it. So basically, in this movie, the main characters are going to enter into your brain and go into your dreams. Okay. And then, while they're in that dream, they find the dream version of you, and then they go into that dream, and then they do it again and again and again. And at the end of it, they're all coming back. Basically, their idea is to put an idea in your mind that when you wake up from your dream, you think you came up with it on your own. So that's the idea of the movie. But at the end of the movie, there's a point where the main character is in a scene, and something happens, and it's left up to the watcher to decide: is this guy awake or is he still stuck in a dream? And nobody really agrees. Now that is what today's sermon is like today. I was looking into this parable, and it's only about one sentence long. Jesus says one sentence. And as I start to look into what he means in that, I have to look into the context. When I look into that context, it takes me somewhere else, which takes me somewhere else, which takes me somewhere else. And it's by the end of this, I think I read the whole Bible this week. But yeah, it was over. But as I got like several days into this, and I hadn't even started writing what I was going to say, I was like, what am I going to do? And so I prayed about it, and hopefully he answered my prayers. You'll find out. But but it was very difficult to figure out. But I had to try to focus it in on what God was trying to say actually in this parable versus everywhere it was taking me. There's a lot more to this than what we're going to go through tonight. So, dear Lord, I need your help today and every day because I'm not enough. I pray that you will guard my words, protect your people's ears, speak to their hearts only what you want them to hear. Guide me to say what you want heard, and help me to speak only your truth so that they will not be led in any direction other than the one you want them to go. In Jesus' name, amen. So, today I'm going to tell you when Jesus comes back. Yeah. Yeah, super easy, right? Super easy. So if you would turn to Matthew 24, verse 32. So here's the one sentence that spews into the entire Bible. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. And in 33, so likewise ye, when you hear, or when you shall see these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. So, you can see where I immediately have to figure out what is he even talking about. So, the first dive, I have to go and look into context, figure out what he's talking about here. Luckily, here wasn't too far away. I'm going to move to Matthew 24, verse 3, so we can see what he's doing. So here, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? So we can quickly see he's just answering their question. He's letting them know that these will be the signs. He'll go from here and actually tell you what the signs are. But that's where we're at now. So we know that what he's talking about in that is that the tree is a sign of summer when it's budding, so summer's coming. These signs are going to be what happens before the end. So, in verse 4, Jesus answered to them and says, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. So the only way to be careful to not be deceived is to actually listen to what he's saying, because he's going to tell us what's going to happen. And if we don't pay attention to what is happening, what he's telling us to look for, then we can believe something else is happening. And we're in 6. Oh, and also the first sign, obviously, is showing us that there will be false prophets and false Christs. In verse 6, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So the next sign is wars and rumors of wars. How much does the world want us to worry? There's a huge sign that's something you shouldn't listen to if you're worried about it. If you're watching TV and they're saying something that's worrying you, probably ought to just turn that off. It's not God. If you pay attention, you're going to find out when you're being deceived, because anything that's telling you to worry is deceiving you. 365 times in the Bible, God says, do not fear. One for every day of the year. It's not a coincidence. So don't fear. Get away from what's causing you fear. In verse 7, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. And all these are the beginning of sorrows. So Jesus comforts the disciples. Don't worry. This is just the beginning of the sorrows. So here I actually did do a little bit of a dive into a commentary. So the way where it says sorrows here, it's not actually sorrows. It's more labor pains. Labor pains is a little bit different, because when you have labor pains, you're bringing forth new life. So something good is about to happen. Well, eventually. And continuing in verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. A lot of these things are sounding familiar, right? We've seen many wars. Natural disasters are all over the place, becoming more and more prevalent. Christians are already being hated and killed in many places. People are offended. Don't even get me started. Some men are mad that you called them a man, even though they are a man. Offended. Hatred and division are spreading like crazy. Gospel will be preached in all the world. I'm not sure the percentage, pastor might know it, but we're not too far off from that either. So the third dive is, what is the beginning of sorrows? Are we already seeing those signs? What does Jesus mean? The beginning of sorrows here is speaking about the start of the tribulation period. So what we are seeing is not these signs, but it is showing you we're not far off. We're a split second away from where all of those things can start taking place. So the fact that it's pointing to the tribulation, let's talk a little bit about the tribulation. Don't have time to talk about a ton of it. So when I started into that dive, that's where a pastor, I'm sure he knows all about it. When I told him what I was speaking on today, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." but so basically, I'll just go to the simple terms of it, because I don't want to get too much into it, because that takes me too many places. But it's a 7-year period, and it's split into 2 3.5-year periods. What we're talking about here is these signs are taking place in the first 3.5. There's a lot more to it, and I have to force myself to move on. Otherwise, we will get stuck there forever. In verse 15, so when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let them understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Okay, so anybody know what the abomination of desolation is? Well, guess what? We get to look for it. Oh, of course Albert knows. Albert, you want to come tell us? So, kind of sounds like a neat little movie, right? Like Abomination of Desolation in a world. No. But if we are going to know the signs, we have to figure out what this sign actually is because it's one of the signs. It's actually a very important sign. So, in Daniel 9, verse 27. I always look this way, but it's right there. Yeah. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto consummation. And that determined shall pour or be poured upon the desolate. So Daniel here is actually talking about the same thing Jesus is talking about. The he here is referring to the Antichrist. And I can go into a whole another little thing about that. Well, not a little thing, but for the sake of time, we'll stick to this. So he's talking about the tribulation that will start with the covenant of peace for 7 years with Israel. During the first 3.5 years, he's going to honor that peace treaty. He's actually going to be a pretty good guy. He's going to bring peace. Albert, he is. People are going to follow him. They're going to want to follow him. And it's not going to be until the abomination of desolation takes place that they realize who he really is. So Israel, well, there's actually a little bit more to this prophecy, and I'll touch on it real quick just because I found it interesting and I wanted to share it with you. So one of the things I didn't really know, because I just assume Israel's been around forever, right? Because they're in the Bible and they're around now, so they must be around forever. They were actually gone in 70 AD until, if you Google when Israel began, you would get May 14th, 1948. There was no Israel from 70 till 1948. So partly fulfilled his prophecy just because you can't destroy Israel if there is no Israel, right? The next part is where this takes place. The abomination takes place in the Jerusalem temple. Well, that temple's not there yet. So there's something else that's still got to come. That temple has to be built. That's where the sacrifices that the Jewish people do, that's where it take place. So eventually the Antichrist is going to reinstate the temple and the sacrifices in the temple. So unfortunately, this verse doesn't actually tell us what the abomination is, though. So here we go. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to Revelation 13:5. Sending me on a wild goose chase. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. The power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So quick recap. In Matthew, the abomination of desolation happens. We find out that Daniel is the one who predicted it. It's what the Antichrist does after 3.5 years of peace with Israel. Most people think he's going to be a good guy. He's going to allow them to rebuild the temple. We go from there to Revelations, where we find out that the abomination is actually him blaspheming God. In some places it says that he says he is God. He's gonna break the peace treaty and begin a war against Israel, against the Jewish people. And then we jump back into Matthew, where the Jewish people are now fleeing. So we're going to move up from 24:16. We're going to skip a few because there's several verses where it just says how fast the Jewish people need to run to get away from them, because there's going to be massive, way worse than the Holocaust type of situation going on. So in Matthew 24:21, then shall be the great tribulation. Such was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. And except those days would be shortened, there should be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Then, if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is the Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall rise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. So in the Great Tribulation, which is the second half of that 3.5 year period, which starts immediately after the Abomination of Desolation, the Antichrist will reveal his intentions. He's going to stop the sacrifices. He's going to take over the temple, and he's going to begin to destroy God's people. And they are just have to run to the wilderness. Things that are going to happen are so horrible that nothing that has ever happened even compares to it. And there's been a lot of horrible things that have happened. So that's saying quite a bit. So now we have to figure out who the elect are. So the woman, and let's go to Revelations 12:6. And this is me cutting back on all the places I could have gone. Just And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. I kind of missed the part there. Part of how we know the length of the tribulation is 42 months, 42 months is 3.5 years. 1,203 score, or 260 days is also 3.5 years. So the woman here is Israel. God's chosen people are fleeing the Antichrist, and God's still not done with his people. At this point, they actually are not believers in Jesus Christ. They're still Jewish. That's why there's sacrifices in the temple. We don't have to do sacrifices. So in his incredible mercy, he's still protecting them. He has prepared a place for Israel in the wilderness for 1,260 days, where he even feeds them. Because during this time period, it is the goal of the Antichrist to wipe them out. So in here, some people believe it's all believers in that time, but basically the church is already going to be gone. I'll go to that here in a little bit to try and explain where that comes from, but I won't go too far into it because it doesn't speak to this as much. So the Jews are not yet believers, like I said, and God's going to use this period to bring them back to him. Because, I mean, nothing brings you back to God more than, oh man, I need you right now, right? So they don't believe he's the Messiah, but they're wrong. He's going to have mercy on them by allowing the tribulation to happen, so that will bring them back to him, giving them one last shot before judgment. So let's jump back to Matthew 24:24, because there's some interesting things he said there. If anybody says they know where Christ is during this time, they're lying. The fact that he says there will be false Christs and false prophets, they will have great signs and wonders, and they will perform that are so convincing that if it were possible, they would deceive God's elect. So why isn't it possible to deceive them? Well, if you know God and you stand on his word, you know already. He just said, it's not going to be me. That's not how I'm getting there. He says in verse 25, behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say to you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. It's not going to be a secret where he's at. Everybody's going to know where he's at when he comes. So God's elect are going to know it's true because they're going to know his word. They're going to stand on his word. And this isn't just for the tribulation period. This is for us too. We need to stand on his word. If we know it and stand on it, and someone tells us something, we should analyze it with the Bible. Don't just believe it because someone you talk to you think is reputable. Don't believe it because you saw it on the news. Especially don't believe it if you saw the news, right? But we should not even believe our own eyes because God already told us the truth. He even told us our eyes will deceive us. He's not coming back and hanging out in places telling parables like he did the first time. He's coming back like lightning. So now let's find out how are the elect going to know that it's him and not the false Christ. In verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with great sound of trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So, immediately after 7 years of tribulation, that's when he will show his face. The world will be completely dark. He's going to appear in glory. A trumpet's going to sound, and all his elect will be gathered. So the first time anyone will see Jesus is after everything goes dark. Well, other than the people who are already in heaven, obviously, but here on earth. We're now back to the start of the parable where Jesus talked about the fig trees and the signs. So let's wake up all the way back to the top level. Inception. So in verse 34, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. So Jesus says that this time won't pass until all these things happen. Not most of them, not just a few of them, all of them. Some people like to look back, and this is one of the things I found when I was searching, is some people are going to look and say, oh, that's the temple he's talking about right there. Well, it didn't happen during this 7-year time frame, so it can't be. It didn't happen. All of these things didn't happen, so it doesn't have anything to do with it. It's completely separate. So you can't look at one event and say he meant that if it doesn't satisfy at all. The Bible is extremely specific on this time frame. About 12 different places, maybe more than that. It says exactly how long it will be, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, what's going to happen in between. 7 years shortened only by his coming to protect his people. So if it's only here for if the Israel's only means to be there, why are we even talking about it? What's it matter? Well, let's go on a little bit. Let's talk about us a little bit. In verse 36, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So obviously, we've already talked about when he's coming back. So he must be meaning a different time here. He just said 7 years, after 7 years, after it goes dark, all of these things. He gave a time frame, right? So he's talking about a different coming right here. In verse 37, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving into marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came that took them away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, one shall be taken and the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be taken and the other left. So, people disappearing out of nowhere. So now we're talking about the rapture. When does it happen? Well, just like in the days of Noah. It happens before the judgment, before the tribulation, before the flood comes in as judgment. So who's going to go? Anyone who believes, just like in the days of Noah. Anybody who believed Noah could have got on that ark, any one of them, but they didn't. Instead, they mocked him and faced judgment. Let's go to verse 44. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not the Son of Man cometh. Who then is faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is the servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, finds so doing. Jesus says, since you don't know when I'm coming, you'd better be doing what I called you to do. When I come back, you better be doing what I called you to do. Blessed are those that are found doing the work of the Lord when he returns. So why are we here? We're here to preach the gospel and win the lost, so that they don't have to endure the tribulation time either. Dear Lord, I thank you for your word. Thank you for your promise. We know that everything is set for your coming. No one knows when that will be but you. Help us to be about your business. Help us to recognize our purpose. Put us in situations to serve you exactly the way you want us to. Bring us to those people that are ready to hear your word. Let our seed fall on fertile ground and take root. Encourage us as we go about our week. Open our eyes and our ears to what you are guiding us to do. In your name I pray. Amen.